Chair Embler? Vice Chair Ponte? Paul Tilka? Jerry Cantrell?
Here.
Judith Ann McLaughlin? For the record, Christina Ponte and Judith Ann McLaughlin is absent.
Okay.
We-
And
We do have a quorum.
Okay, and I would like to clarify, I believe that the city attorney is on the call via Zoom.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. And Rob, if you would clarify for us, please, I'm not sure if Judith Ann is on the line. If participants are here via Zoom, either you or Judith Ann, what is it that you can and cannot do in this session?
So they're welcome to participate, but based upon Mr. Trask's advice to the commission, because she's not physically present, she cannot vote.
Okay, good. So if I could please ask the city if they notice that Judith Ann is on Zoom, that we allow her to speak, but with the knowledge that she's not going to be allowed to vote.
Judith Ann did not answer during roll call, so we would need to know if she's even present, because I have her down as absent.
Okay, I know that Jerry had to go back and ask that Rob be unmuted, so I don't know if Judith Ann is on Zoom but muted. So I'm just asking the city to
Yeah.
verify that if she's present, no, she's not. Okay, thank you for that. All right. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. First thing is the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I have a comment on this. There's one thing I saw in the minutes, and I'm trying to pull it up real quick so I can tell you where it's at,
Okay.
that I wanted to clarify. Here we go. In my document, it is page 11, the third to the bottom paragraph. It reads 9/11 on that page itself, but on the document's number is 11. Is that 12? So go back one more.
The minutes are numbered, so in the packet, it will have two numbers.
11 here, okay? Are you able to see it, Mr. Tilka?
No.
No?
Where's it at?
Okay, it's on page 11.
Oh, last one.
So go to 11, it's the third from the bottom paragraph.
Okay.
Here, there we go. All right. In this document, it reads, Mr. Cantrell said there are a few differentiations between exempt and non-exempt employees, which are classified and non-classified, and those differences are spelled out in the document. He believes they belong there. That last part, he believes they belong there, I believe is incorrect. I do not believe it belongs there. The way the city charter is spelled out is different from the way the policy is written. So the policy further differentiates based upon what the charter is actually stating.
I would have the clerk's officer listen at that.
Okay?
I'm sorry, Clara, I didn't hear you.
We'll listen at that on the tape.
Okay.
So with that change, I'd like to, is that this right way? With that change, I'd like to motion that we approve the
Yes.
minutes?
Yes, yes, sir. You are correct.
So
You have
I'd
to
like to second that with that modification on page 11.
Okay, so your motion one, Jerry?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Jerry Cantrell,
Yes.
Paul Tilka,
Here?
Chair Embler,
Approved?
vote carried 3-0.
Okay. Thank you, Clara. And while we're on this subject of the meeting minutes, a while back you had committed to get us the minutes within 2 weeks of the meeting, and this one came through, I want to say, just last week. I'd like to reiterate my request that they come to us 2 weeks after the meeting so that the meeting is still sharp in our minds and we're better able to state whether things in here are correct or not.
Correct. I had thought they had been sent to you, and because I know they were completed like a week after the meeting, so you should have even gotten them much sooner than that.
Okay. Well, I'll
But I'll make
let
sure.
you and your staff
Yes.
figure out
Yes.
why it's not happening, but again, I want to reiterate how
Correct.
important it is to be prompt with this.
Yes, that is important.
Is this the appropriate place to ask questions about the past minutes? Because there's some things that I didn't see in the document. I just want to verify if we have them, because I'm not
Yes,
aware
sir.
if they're there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It is?
You, I mean, you can do that. I mean, it's not a part of the approval of the minutes, but
Okay.
it's,
On page 6, I asked if there was a document showing the current job titles, and if they passed the test for exempt status. The city manager said that they do similar tasks. From his perspective, they had misclassified the positions, and I'm saying this, the city manager will provide the information showing the reason for the change. Has that been provided? Because I did not
I
see it.
have not received that.
Okay.
No, sir.
Can we get that added to the minutes for the next meeting, that we need that document, please?
Yes, sir.
Let's see, another thing, page 7, we talked about comp time, all right? We talked about comp time, and the city manager said that it was not currently being performed routinely or consistently among different departments or areas. The wording may be a little different. I'd like to know where we are with that, because under the current terms, which was the personnel policy created in 2019, it actually states that if an employee has comp time, that it should be paid out at a specific time in the year.
We do that.
We need to assure that that's happened over the last 2 years. So can we ask where that's at?
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
know that comp time is paid at time and a half, and for the clerk's office, they use it, the employee uses it that same week.
Yes.
They
Understood.
choose to do that.
Understood. But if it accrues, it's supposed to be paid out on an annual basis.
Yes,
It's not
it
supposed
is.
to carry over from year to year.
Correct. That, I
Okay.
know that was done because I know with my executive assistant, her accrual was paid out. She had like 8 to 10 hours, and they were paid out to her in her last check in December.
Okay, all right. I have some notes on classification, but I know that's listed somewhere else in this, so I'm not going to bring that up. I think it's inappropriate of me at that time, all right?
Yes.
I'm trying to make sure, because I have a lot of notes here, and these I didn't highlight to show how I'm differentiating them. Nope. Okay, done that. Okay, I'm done. That's it. Thank you for the time. I'm sorry it took me a while to get through that.
No worries. So the next item on the agenda is the HR report. Megan, what do you have for us?
Currently, I've been tasked with going over the handbook to make sure that we have no grammatical errors as well as spacing and formatting. It's a bit of a bear. It looks like this document originated with an old version of Word, which is why it's been harder for us to copy and paste. So we're just going to have to bite the bullet and just redo it. So that's something that I'm working on right now, as well as updating the job descriptions, because a lot of those were, I want to say some of them for 2015.
Correct. I know that a former city manager had all the department directors to update them, for them to update them for their employees, so they got to be somewhere. I have mine, so. And I'll give you those.
Okay, and along those lines, I'm going to stay with, we had talked in our last session, and the notes reflect that there would be an update and a revision about the job descriptions and the pay grade. Megan, I see you've given us the pay grades, and I understand you're still working on the job descriptions.
Yes, ma'am.
So what would you like us to know about your pay grades, and what changes have been made, and how did you get to this documentation?
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? I think it's a point of order here. The classifications, so pay plan and classified city positions, Part B under new business, and Part C is classification of all classified city positions based upon the duties, authority, and responsibilities of each position with adequate provisions for classification of any position wherever warranted by circumstances. I think that's covered under those two discussions.
Okay, we can move it to C then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to short it,
That's-
it's just I think it
that's-
belongs in a different spot.
That's fine.
All right.
So I'll give you a couple minutes. Robin, welcome, glad you're here. Let the minutes please reflect that Robin has joined us. We're just getting started. We've approved the minutes, and Robin gave an HR report.
Megan,
Megan did, yes. And we're about to go to old business unless is there anything that people would like to add under the HR report out? Okay. Item number 6 is old business, and it refers to the draft personnel policy, and there is a discussion by Jerry. I would like to, in a moment, let Jerry go through what he has found. I would also like to share that I had a very productive meeting on Friday afternoon with Robin and Megan. For me personally, as I was going through the document that we were given at the last meeting, I had a challenge looking at it for substance because I found so many things that, due to the various changes that Megan talked about, I had a hard time following it. And I know it's my own idiosyncrasies, but if we don't have commas or there are incomplete sentences, I struggle with looking at substance. As I said, on Friday, I had a very productive meeting, and we went through my concerns about grammar and clerical issues, and I left it up to the city to decide how they're going to do it. But based on all of the changes that have to be made just to get it up to a readable version, I'm going to recommend that we listen to what Jerry has to say and then consider whether it makes sense delaying until the next meeting when we have a clean document to go through.
We would also have to add Mr. Cantrell's, since we just received them this morning, apparently. They arrived this morning, is that correct, Clara?
Yeah, he had gave them to us last night.
Or last night? So they were forwarded to me this morning. We will add them for next meeting.
Well, what we've done in the past is that members submit the changes, the group discusses them, and as a group, we decide whether to add them or not. So are you suggesting
But
that you
no,
go
I'm saying,
ahead and
no, we
include
go
his?
through with his statements. I'm just saying a final draft with all the grammatical corrections and all the changes that I'm guessing Mr. Cantrell will propose and you approve or not today. We will bring you back a complete final draft at the next meeting.
Correct. And far as those notes, if you let me explain, in the last meeting, it was agreed that Contrell provide the notes, and someone had asked if they could get copies of those. And Attorney Eschenfelder said he would first like to go through those first before they're submitted. And my understanding is they were submitted to him, and they just never received a response, and so he sent them to us.
Do we know when he received those?
Rob is on via Zoom, so.
Oh, Rob.
I can tell you when he received them. I can pull up the emails to specific dates. I don't have them on hand.
Okay.
But I sent them to him no less than 4 times, each time asking for update. I copied
Okay.
the mayor. I don't remember if I copied you.
Are you on the bank?
Say what?
You need to turn your mic on, please.
I thought it was on. Oh, I'm
there
just
you
not
go.
close
There
enough.
you go.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not close enough. I sent it to him at least 4 times. I believe it was 5 times. And I consistently asked for follow-up. I wanted to get the comments back because the comments make a difference. I mean, if you guys have already discussed something, there's no point in my trying to go through unless it's like, hey, there's just something
I'm just
wrong.
asking because at the last meeting, the direction was to have those comments within a couple of weeks after the last meeting.
And it was impossible to do because Mr. Eschenfelder said he wanted to look at them first.
No, I meant to get them to Mr. Eschenfeld, okay?
They
which
were
you did,
immediately.
yeah, okay.
They were sent to
Thank
him
you.
immediately.
Okay, let's pause here for a moment. Rob, I think you're on the line. Did you receive Jerry's information?
So I had a conversation with the mayor and a follow-up conversation with Mr. Trask after our last meeting. And the consensus was that we work through the Civil Service Commission when they're in the sunshine. And that if there was extensive request from any member outside of the meeting, that just to not have excessive billing on something that the commission may or may not agree to, that I would wait for the full Civil Service Commission to meet. So that's why we're just going to go through them
We
today.
can go them to.
When was that decided?
I want to say probably days after the last commission meeting.
Why did I not get a response telling me that? Because there's other things I could have done, gotten my notes out quicker.
No, I appreciate that. I didn't convey it to you. I should have.
Say that again, please.
I said, I didn't convey that to you, but I should have. I apologize.
All right.
So then, I believe where we are, and I want to make sure, Robin, that we're on the same page, that we have, let's call them two categories. Category one, I'm going to call grammar. That has to do with the things that you, Megan, and I looked at. And I understand that Megan is taking a look at that. The second area is, shall we say, substance. And during our meeting, I didn't give you any of my substance issues, but I do have them, but I haven't submitted them yet. Jerry has submitted his substance issues. I'm going to recommend that we follow the same path that we did before. Even though you've got Jerry's input, please don't change the document yet until the whole team takes a look at it, because we may agree or we may disagree, but
Yes.
as we've done in the past.
Yep.
Is that
Yes,
Is
that's
that
correct.
everybody's understanding? All righty. And so based on the fact that I know I've got mine, but I didn't submit them yet, and Jerry, yours came in, I guess this morning, and I understand why now, and I think we'll put that behind us. So my recommendation is that under old business, we don't go through this draft right now, but by the end of this meeting, we hear from Megan as to when all the grammar changes can be implemented and a clean copy sent to us. Maybe you know that now, or maybe you need some time to think about that, Megan?
I think I actually need to start typing and see how long it takes me and then kind of go from there. I plan to start doing that this afternoon. I was going to yesterday, but I was homesick, unfortunately. So I just kind of have to see how long it's going to take to
Yeah.
get the flow
But,
down.
I mean, I'm sure we can get that to you next week.
Yes.
I mean, I would tentatively say 1 week from today,
I think that's
the
fair.
18th, that we can get that with all the corrections that we discussed, all the grammatical, clerical corrections by the 18th.
Okay.
May I present my PowerPoint? Because one of the things was asked is, how did we get to where we're at?
Sure, if I can just finish this train,
All
and
right,
then we'll
okay.
turn it over to you. So then, we will, at the next meeting, which is scheduled for August 8th, go over the document updated with grammar changes only, and I'm going to ask that my fellow committee members do, as Jerry did, submit their suggestions to Clara. They'll be in a Word doc. I will have submitted mine, and then we can more efficiently go through those at the next meeting.
And
Is
please
that a
send
fair
them,
way?
yeah, just send them to Megan Powers as
Oh,
well, and
Megan?
to
Okay.
myself.
Okay,
That way we all have all the documents,
okay,
and we will bring you a final draft version.
but only with grammar cleaned
The
up.
grammar, correct, excuse me, with the grammar.
Not our
clerical,
feedback on
correct.
substance.
You will
Okay.
discuss that, I take it, at that meeting.
Yes. Okay. We talk about them in sunshine.
Sounds good.
Yes. All right. Is everybody okay with that plan? Paul, you all right with that? Okay.
I would honestly prefer it just go to the ex officio and have it there. We need to have our discussions, in my opinion, we need to have our discussions, make sure we're in concert with each other, and then proceed forward saying, hey, what do you guys have for input? It's kind of like if you're, and this is for instance,
Wait, who is these guys?
we're the five of us,
Commission.
or the commission, all right? These guys, I apologize, would be anybody outside of the five of us, all right? And I don't want to exclude anyone, because I honestly believe that if we're not including the city manager, we are not doing our jobs.
Right.
We will be making serious mistakes by not including the city
Right.
manager. But I also know that when you're trying to set up, and once I do my presentation, you'll have a better understanding why I'm saying this. We're supposed to come up with a personnel policy. We need to decide what we
No.
want in there, and then also include him once we made our decisions. We need to make the decisions first, so that way we have an understanding of what it is we believe that needs to be there. Then we proceed to the city manager, because part of what happens is when we go through the implementation, we're evaluating every level of it to assure that the steps that we're asking to happen are actually happening. Where if we include the city manager right up front, are we missing anything?
But
And that's nothing
just-
against.
no, right, but I
I'll give
have
you a
not-
moment to
I have
speak,
not
please. I'm not
provided
done.
any
I'm not done.
information or
Please hold.
input, though.
Please hold, all right?
I just wanted to be
I
clear,
will give you
though,
a moment to speak. Please hold, all right? So, I don't want to exclude the city manager. I don't want to exclude human resources. As I said, I really believe that is a poor idea if we do that.
So what is your suggestion, Jerry? I'm
My
not
suggestion,
following.
let me give you a for instance, just an analogy. When you're in a leadership position and you have to make decisions, it's important that you make those decisions first. You need to make those decisions first. And then you reach out to the people that it will affect. And at that point, you ask those people that it affect, how is this going to change what you're trying to do? What can you or can you not meet us in doing this? And then you take into consideration what that person's saying and making sure that you're not like pushing them against a wall to where that they can't do anything. But we need to make decisions, and then we ask for that input. Because based on the charter, he has to concur with whatever is going to be placed. It does not prevent us from holding a joint committee meeting with the Board of Commissioners, anybody else that's making a decision. If we can't come to a common standing ground, then the Board of Commissioners will actually be the group that makes the ultimate decision on what will be the decisions that are made. We need to decide first. It's just like if you're raising, this is, I'm not trying to say you're not capable of making decisions. Please know that. Any city manager, I'm not trying to say that. But it's similar where if you're raising your children, do you go to your children and talk to your children up front? This is what I'd like to do. What would you like to do? Or do you say, this is what we need to do, and then you allow your children to come in and then talk to them? Because it's important that they do have input. But you need to have an understanding of what you want done before you go and ask somebody else, hey, what's going on? And we need to be reasonable. We as a Civil Service Commission need to be reasonable and listen.
Jerry, if, in the interest of time, I know you've not been present for these meetings, and perhaps looking through the minutes, things aren't as clear as how they've progressed. But Paul, at the end, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that we have done this is, prior to each meeting, we agreed what section were we going to review at the next meeting. We asked everyone to provide written notes ahead of time so that we could think about it and the meeting would be productive. At that meeting, our notes were all discussed,
The commission knows.
the commission, thank you,
Commissioners.
and in the presence of the city manager, the former HR manager, the whole
For
group.
some of the meetings that I was here.
And there were, we would ask when appropriate for a legal ruling from the attorney, and we would do just as you said. If we questioned something, we would turn to the city manager, HR, and say, has this been a problem in the past? Is this something? And then we would get the legal perspective, and we would get the perspective of tradition and what has gone on. Paul, am I accurately reflecting? So what I'm trying to say is that I think that we have been doing what you are suggesting, but perhaps it's hard to read through the minutes to see that this has been following. And that's what I'm suggesting again, that now we're going to have a clean document next week. We all look at it. We type up our notes ahead of time. We send it to these three people. We come in, and we all have a chance to review it. Now, Paul has suggested that it's a challenge for him to go on the computer, so he reviews things and then verbally gives during the meeting, it might say section 6.2, whatever I think needs to be. So I believe that we've been doing
Okay.
what you're challenging.
I respect that. Thank you. Yeah.
So, Clara, did you want to add?
I think where Cantrell is coming from, because it does say, in City Charter, Section 5.7, Personnel Systems, Civil Service Commission, and Paragraph C, Personnel Rules. It says, the Civil Service Commission shall prepare the personnel rules. When concurred in by the city manager, it's almost as if they present them, and then the rules shall be, when he agrees with them, and if he don't agree with something, he comes back and says, I'd like this changed, or whatever, the rules shall be proposed to the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners may by ordinance adopt them with or without amendment. In other words, they can also amend it.
And that's what has been happening in
So the
these
civil
meetings.
service, like in the past, they actually prepared the rules, and then we came back with a document, and then the city manager took it, and I think that's when he had took out that whole discipline section, And then the Board of Commissioners called it. Nobody else had called it because it didn't go back to the Civil Service Board and say, hey, I'd like to remove this section. So they prepare it, come up with whatever, and then it's presented, and then he goes through it and reviews it and fixes.
And that's what's been happening
Yes.
all, even before I was the
If
manager
they do
here.
prepare them and make something nice, error-free and all this kind of stuff, somebody can, fix it up real pretty, and then when you get done, then you can turn it over for review.
Right, and I believe that's the plan, that to get it, done, and then we will meet with the Board of Commissioners, and obviously, they'll have the opportunity to make changes, throw it out, tweak it, however, and when we get it done, I absolutely agree, we need to be present to give a presentation, to reflect how we have been involved in this. So I think we're on the same page, but I don't want to assume, are you okay?
I
with-
believe that we are are in the same direction, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Madam Chair, before you leave the cleanup, I just wanted to make sure that Megan, as she's going through, the current document, throughout, it has a bunch of references to resolutions of the past and ordinances of the past. And so none of that is necessary. And so as you go through, just delete all of that.
Would you suggest that I do a strike through for that, just so it's shown?
No, because it's not substantive
Okay.
changes. It's just historical references, but you just don't need to, you don't need to stick those kind of things in, to your personnel policy. When you adopt a new one, the employees don't need to read all that legislative history. They just need to know what are the rules that are applicable to my employment.
Okay, fair enough.
That was just a process the city has used for some time for
Right,
whatever
I know.
reason. But yeah, I agree with you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Nope, sounds like y'all are ready to move forward.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Jerry's presentation. I did look at it before I came, but I want to hear the
Quite
words
lengthy.
behind it. Yeah.
It's, okay, so we're ready to move forward? Ms.
think
Tilka,
so.
you okay? All right, so,
I'm sorry, Rob, are you able to see this, the presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Staff
Okay.
has it on my screen.
All right.
Perfect, thank you.
so I looked at this because based upon the current personnel policy we're looking at was based upon a 2019 policy that was voted in through ordinance. I looked back through it and I found out, well, where did that come from? And I tried to research a lot of information. I went through Civil Service Commission notes, joint meeting notes. I went through budget notes, BOC regular, BOC workshop, as well as I did look at some of the planning, but I started to realize it's nothing in planning so that we need. Not that there's nothing in planning, nothing we need for civil service. All right, so based on that 2019, as I said, I realized that there had been a 2014 document, and that's what things were based on. So I went back, because there's some things that were mentioned that happened in 2017 that I've read throughout other documents. So I went back and I looked at 2018. I looked for 2016 and 17. There are no Civil Service Commission meeting notes on 2016 and 17. I've made a request. I'm going to go further into this because I want to go a little further back and get some more information. So I'll have more information if I ever need to talk about it. But going forward, all right? So I want to start out just by saying that, make sure I'm moving this the right way. All right, so it was the May 30th, 2023 Civil Service Commission meeting. I was asked to go back and do a review of the meetings to give a synopsis of what documentation you guys have reviewed and what's happened. And to do that, I really need to go back to 2018, all right? How did this come about? All right, so I've got an introduction, charter review, and a few items of note, all right? I want to start by reading that Article 5, Section 5.7. This is Section B, all right? Civil Service Commission membership. There shall be a Civil Service Commission of the City of Madeira Beach, Florida, which commission shall be composed of 5 citizens of said city. The Civil Service Commission shall be appointed by the Board of Commissioners of the City of Madeira Beach, Florida. So that just establishes who we are, that we have to be residents, and we are the Civil Service Commission. Our rules we make separately, all right? So I go through and I'm looking at personnel rules, and I believe Ms. Van Blargen already read this, but I'm going to read it again. Sorry if it's redundant, all right? The Civil Service Commission shall prepare personnel rules. That's the 5 of us, all right? When concurred by the city manager, which means the city manager does need to agree to it by the charter, so that means it has to happen, all right? The rules shall be proposed to the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners may adopt by ordinance, or may by ordinance adopt them with or without amendment. So when I read this, this means that, okay, he has to agree, but if he doesn't agree, we can still go to the Board of Commissioners. We can call our own joint meeting. We do not need to go through the city manager to establish a meeting with the Board of Commissioners. This is the minimum. We are allowed to call our own joint meeting, the 5 of us, all right, the civil service. When I say 5 of us, it's cool, right? All right. Okay, you good with that too? All right. So, first, the classification of all classified city positions.
I'm sorry, Jerry, I'm
Yeah.
a little slow here.
All right.
So the Civil Service Commission, and it's chopped off on the print version.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah. So and the rules shall be proposed.
This is directly
So-
out of the charter.
Right, when concurred by the city manager, the rules will be proposed, and the board may, by ordinance, adopt them or not.
Yeah,
I understood you to say that we can go to the Board of Commissioners without the city manager.
yes, we can. We can have a joint meeting.
Okay.
We can. Our minimum on this personnel policy is to ask that he, guys, I'm sorry, I mentioned
Yeah.
this ahead of time. I need 1 minute.
Sure.
This is about my surgery tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay? I apologize.
I'll explain my question, but we'll make sure we resolve it with Jerry in the room. I'm reading it to say that when concurred by the city manager, then we can go to the Board of Commissioners. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. Rob, can you help me with that, please? Jerry's interpreting it, I interpret it, that means
Well,
that,
do you want to wait for Ms.
Yeah,
Commissioner
I was going
Okay.
to
Cantrell
suggest that
come
we
back?
could wait, but just to give you, and then I'll repeat it when he comes
Yeah.
back, but I think they're presented to me, and if I agree, I mean, first of all, it would be very difficult to disagree with all of it, for one.
right,
But two, there may be sections, but I think this is the process. It goes Civil Service Commission to the manager to the BOC.
right.
That's pretty clear. I think the words "when concurred," again, it would be very difficult to not concur with the entire document and say, no, I disagree with all of it. Could that happen? I guess it could, but I'm telling you that that's not going to happen. But, excuse me, making the inference is, I think, a little bit dangerous. I think this is the process, and I mean, I'm fine however you would like to do it. I will still be at all the meetings, but
Right.
the point is that there is a process, and
Right, okay. And then when Jerry had to take this, he told me ahead of time he had to take this call, so we'll stall. I'm like you, I can't imagine if we have to, we would, but certainly, this has been a partnership, this has been teamwork all
Right,
along,
that's-
so.
I'm sorry, what did I
Oh,
what did I
nothing.
miss? I apologize.
I just kind of wanted some clarification, and we agreed to wait. I asked Rob to clarify your interpretation of, does this mean that we can go to the Board of Commissioners without the city manager? So I'm waiting for
So,
Rob's to.
Yeah, so, all right, so here's how it would work. Number one, the statement that the CSC can call a meeting with the commission is not exactly accurate. You cannot compel the city commission
Request.
to meet with you if it does not wish to meet with you. You can, through a majority vote, request that the city commission schedule a joint meeting with you, but you just need to understand and respect the fact that they are the superior body. And if they do not wish to meet with you, you cannot compel them to meet with you. And I don't know if that's what Commissioner Cantrell,
No, what you
thought
stated,
when he
what you
said-
stated, Mr. Eschenfelder, is what I intended. Thank you for clarifying that for everybody.
Sure. And so then with respect to the language of sub C, how it works is if the Civil Service Commission, well, first of all, the Civil Service Commission is compelled to prepare personnel rules. That's the first sentence of what the charter says. Then the second sentence is, when the city manager concurs with the rules that the Civil Service Commission has prepared, then the rules will be proposed to the commission, who may adopt them with or without amendment. So sub C contemplates preparation by the CSC, acquiescence by the manager, proposal to the commission for final adoption. Embedded in that second sentence is that if the commission prepares rules that the manager does not concur in,
We've lost you, Mr. Eschenfelder.
those rules commission. However, the commission always has, pardon?
We've lost you.
Oh,
I
where
mean,
did-
we can
where
hear you
did you
now,
leave
but
off?
we missed part of it. You're talking about there, once we discuss this and the city manager acquiesces to the rules, and then it went beyond that and we lost some of the communication.
Okay, so once the commission, the Civil Service Commission proposes rules, then the manager has to acquiesce before those rules are proposed to the commission under sub C. That's the way sub C works when you apply the English language. Stepping outside of sub C, the Civil Service Commission is an advisory body to the Board of Commissioners. And so it can decide we are simply unable to come to agreement with the manager on the proposed rules that we have. And so there is nothing that would prevent legally the Civil Service Commission from saying, thank you, manager, for trying to work with us, but we're just going to adopt a motion and ask the city commission to approve these rules that you won't acquiesce in. There's nothing that prevents you from doing that. That's not how sub C contemplates the process, because sub C and the voters who approve this charter provision hope that the manager and the Civil Service Commission work collectively together so that they come up with something that they can all agree on. But we live in a democracy, and so there's nothing that prevents you if you're completely at odds with the manager. You've tried as hard as you could. He will not acquiesce. There's nothing that prevents you from sending what you believe should be the rules to the city commission and ask them to consider them, even though the manager doesn't acquiesce. But that's not applying sub C. That's just applying you guys as an advisory board can do that. You can make that request. And then it will be up to the commission at their meeting to, call up the manager and say, manager, what's the problem? You guys could be there. You guys could talk to the commission. And basically the commission would make its final policy decision. So I hope that explains it. If you're working under sub C, the manager is a barrier to moving forward because he does have the power to acquiesce or not acquiesce. That doesn't mean, though, that you five are powerless if you have a manager that simply refuses to support a rule set that you all, or a majority of you all, feel should go forward and be the rule. Does that explain it?
That does. And also, while we're on that, talk about city managers, there's things I'm going to discuss that have happened historically. And I want to be very clear when I speak city manager in some of this, by no means does it represent Mr. Gomez, all right? Because there were 2 city managers prior to Gomez that are referenced inside of the information that I'm talking about. So I please understand, because as a community, I do not want anyone to feel that I or any of us are making derogatory or negative statements about the current city manager. That is not up to us to make that decision. That is totally up to the Board of Commissioners to make decisions on that person's performance. All right. But I do need to talk about past city managers to understand where we're at. So please know that when I say city manager, it does not mean Mr. Gomez. Everybody's clear with that, right? Okay. Just want to be really clear. Okay. So
Can we make sure that the minutes reflect that? Because I can tell Jerry's passionate about it, so.
It's because it's not the current city manager, and I want to be certain everybody knows that. all right? So the classification, number one, and there are 8 steps here under subsection C. The classification of all classified city positions based upon the duties, authority, and responsibility of each position. Duties, authority, and responsibility of each position, with adequate provisions for classification of any position whenever warranted by circumstances. We are required to classify based upon this rule, based upon the duties, authority, and responsibility. It is not a pay scale classification. It also doesn't differentiate if a person is salaried or not salaried. Classified employees, for us, in my understanding, is every employee that works for the city, and the 4 we can't deal with are the 4 charter officers, because those fall directly under the Board of Commissioners. That is their responsibility under the charter. We have no reflect on any decisions made for those. We are, though, as we read through this, allowed to reflect on whether or not those jobs are being performed adequately and fairly for all employees. And I'll keep reading through. All right? 2, a pay plan for the classified city employees' positions. The classified city positions. Remember, classified does not differentiate between hourly and salaried. It does not. They're inclusive in this context. Right. Methods for determining the merits and fitness of candidates for appointment or promotions. This is covered underneath the current policy, guys. It's in there. There's other things I'd like to add because there's certain things that need to be more specific, but as we talk about it, we'll go through that. The policies and procedures regulating reduction in force, demotion, suspension, and removal of employees. The hours of work, attendance regulation, and provisions for sick and vacation leave. I'd like clarification from Attorney Eschenfelder what it means by hours of work, because I think if we sit here and say the hours of work for everybody in the city are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., it would be ludicrous for the city, for the Civil Service Commission to say that, because there are needs of the city that we cannot determine, and they should be determined by the city manager as well as his administrative officers. So is it, the hours of work are represented of like 40 hours per week. Is that what that represents, Attorney Eschenfelder?
No, typically what you have is a provision that will say the hours of work for city employees is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 7:30 to 4:30 or whatever that particular city or town hall's general business operations are. But then you would have a qualifier which would say, unless otherwise provided for by the job description and the schedule established by the manager, because obviously you've got firefighters who don't work 8 to 5 and so forth.
There's city workers that don't work 8 to 5 too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that's correct. Yeah. Sanitation workers. I mean, there's a whole variety of them. So it's usually a general statement of when are we open for business, and then a qualifier that just because we're generally open for business, your job may require separate. I don't think the Civil Service Commission should go through and set, this particular job works this hour to this hour, because that may change. I mean, the manager needs the ability to set the schedules for the employees under that position.
Ms. Van Blargen, can we have this added to the minutes for the next meeting? Because we don't have a general statement in there saying what the normal hours would be for the city in general, with exceptions that allow for departments to make those rules outside what they need. Because it has to be flexible. But for the city office itself, there should be a set hours that they're open outside of national emergencies, city emergencies, or the holidays. There should be a set hours that's mandated what the hours would be.
Currently, they're 8 to 4:30. Everybody
Okay.
gets a 30-minute lunch. And then some employees, when they're trying it out, the 4-day, 10-hour days, one of my employees chose to do that. And so seeing how that works, and
That's
still
something we
40.
should include into the personnel policy then.
Yeah.
It's okay for people to be
Options.
flexible, they need to
Right,
do that.
flexible, yeah.
But we need to say that these are regular hours. And I'm saying this only because I know of people communicating to me that they've come up here between 8 and 4:30 on not a holiday, and they couldn't get into the office.
But are you, I guess if you could clarify exactly what you're looking for.
It says hours of work. So we should define that the standard hours of work are
That
whatever
the
they
city
are.
as a whole is open.
But the city as a whole is
Official business
open.
hours?
But we don't want to make it so restrictive that
So
you
what
can't
would be
make a
your
determination.
suggestion?
Because sanitation, that's where we have to come up with, I can't
Okay.
make that yet. But that needs to be addressed.
Right.
'cause
As
it's not
Clara
in the
stated,
policy.
so you're aware, our current business hours are 8 to 4:30.
But it's not written in the policy. And
A
I
lot of
have told, I've
policies
had
don't have that
people-
level of detail also.
Okay.
Can I take this to the attorney for clarification? Rob, do you recommend that the handbook say the specific hours of operation of the city?
With
recommendation-
provisions to provide other people, the administration to make changes. Because there needs to be things that happen in the city that we aren't saying that they're working those hours.
Can we let the attorney
Yeah.
opine?
My recommendation was made in the version of personnel policy that I submitted back some years ago. It's section Roman numeral 4, pay hours of work and
It's not
work
this
week.
policy.
A1, due to the variety of services provided by city departments, certain employees may be required to work varying days and hours. Department directors schedule work that is necessary and beneficial for the efficient operation of the city. It is the responsibility of the department director to manage overtime within budgetary constraints. Pursuant to 29 CFR section 553.23, by accepting employment with the city, all overtime eligible employees agree that the city may elect to provide compensatory time in lieu of payment of overtime work in cash pursuant to its compensatory time policies. Employees may also be required at the discretion of the city to use compensatory time in lieu of vacation pay when requesting vacation time off. So that was that's what I had recommended for a description of hours of work.
Is that your 2020 document that was decided not to be used?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. right.
So let me just recommend, Jerry, that you put this in your notes to be relooked at and re-included, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting.
Understood.
Okay,
Will
because
do.
I think it's a fair request, yeah. And then, as we always do, we'll take a look at what you suggest, we'll
Thank you.
decide does it go or not, and
we go.
then we go. So
Okay.
thank you for that.
Item 6, this is significant. Grievance procedures. It's the exact wording inside of the charter. We need to have a grievance procedure. It can't be an appeal. It has to be a grievance procedure. Grievance procedures, including procedures for hearings of grievances by the Civil Service Commission, may render advisory opinions based on the findings of the city manager, findings to the city manager, I apologize, with a copy to the grieved employee. So we make advisory, we must provide it to the employee, we must provide it to the city manager. There's going to be something in the discussion that's going to come up. This is the minimum. This is the minimum we must do, all right? In this respect, the Civil Service Commission shall have the power to issue subpoenas to compel attendance by witnesses and to administer oaths. All right, there's something happened in 2018 that's very significant about this, all right? I understand from notes that were there that it might have been something in 2017. I never could find notes on that. I believe there's another instance. I could only find one, all right?
So what you're suggesting is that in the current updated, we had changed grievance to appeal. I'm not sure why, but can I again recommend that you put in
Yes,
your
I
written
will, and I'm
notes
gonna-
to just change it?
I would do that, but it's
change
in
it
here
back?
already. It's in
Okay.
these notes, and I'll explain why. It was Mr. Lilly that actually said, he said that a grievance was actually something to do with, I think it's organized labor, and an appeal is different, which is an inaccurate description. It's grievance must be grievance based on this. It
Okay.
has to, that's the minimum.
Good
All right.
catch, thank you.
Okay. Other practices and procedures necessary to administer this, of administration of the city personnel system. So basically, this is that one statement that says, okay, if there's something that wasn't covered within reason, you're allowed to make certain steps. Now, we have to be very careful there, because if we step outside of the charter, we're violating the law. But it does give us some leeway, so if we notice something hasn't been accomplished, that we can actually go back and readdress it. Also, it doesn't prohibit us from going back and asking for a change in the charter if we find that we need a change in the charter because we've noticed there's a significant discrepancy in the policy, all right? So there's that. And finally, and this is the one we talked a lot about last time, in connection with the aforementioned personnel rules, the Civil Service Commission shall inquire into implementation of such personnel rules as considered necessary to ensure compliance therewith. This is one of the things we'll be talking about in the meeting today, so I don't want to go too much further into that. Is that all right? Okay, so I'm going to move forward. Items. I'm going to leave this here. I'm not going to read it yet. I'm going to go through my notes and explain where we're at. Now, as I've already said, I know that in 2014 was the original policy. The policy we're currently working on was based out of a 2019 ordinance. That 2019 ordinance was actually to improve on the 2014 ordinance. I'm going to mention city manager in this discussion a lot. Please know that it does not necessarily represent the current city manager. I want to be very clear with that, okay? I want to be very clear with that. So here we go. In 2018, it's important to note this, in 2018 budget, there was a finance director allocation and an HR person allocation. I don't want to go too much further into that. HR is underneath our discussions, all right? In August of 2018, there was a joint Civil Service Commission and Charter Review Committee meeting. Now, Charter Review Committee has actually been disbanded. But both committees agreed that the Civil Service Board needed to have more power to make decisions, especially when it comes to grievances and appeals. This happened because in March of that year, I believe it was March, there was actually a grievance by an employee, all right? That grievance was heard. It was actually went through the actual process. It was documented. They did it just like it was a, what do you call it? It's not a court hearing, but it's a, oh, I'm using the wrong words here. It went through the process where you had a court recorder document all the words of the meeting. There were 3 separate sets of lawyers inside of that meeting, one for the commission, one for the city, and there was one for another. I don't know what it was.
There were
but-
3. One was the civil service attorney.
Okay.
They had at that time. They had a separate one from the city.
So there's a separate civil service attorney from the city attorney.
Okay.
All right? Okay. Arbitration, what they understood there is that arbitration steps needed to be put in place so that all employees would have due process in the event an employee was terminated. All right? In September of that year, there was a meeting regarding the grievance and termination of Miranda Pattern. Miranda Pattern is a person that was documented. Ends up going through to January of 2019. Now this is it took a while, from September 2018 to January 2019. All right, the labor attorney explained that the city manager's final discussion to cut off the possibility of a phase 2 hearing terminated any further discussions about the Civil Service Commission's findings. So literally what happened is, I think that was Evans at that point. This is the city commissioner, Evans, actually sat on the document, did not take it forward to the Board of Commissioners. And from that point, the Board of Commissioners said, we need to do a few things different. And they also said they wanted the Civil Service Commission to have more teeth. So here we go. 2019, this is the wrong one, sorry. March of 2019, there was a Civil Service Committee meeting. The public sector personnel consultants stated that, oh, this is important. I think this might be in the wrong spot. It's about classification, so I'm not going to read this out, okay? July of 2019, all right, the personnel policy had not been updated since 2014. That was discussed in this, and this was a BOC, a budget review, and a joint Civil Service Commission meeting all in one, okay? Commissioner Andrews at that point noted that Article 10, the disciplinary action, had been removed from the policy. The city manager of that time removed the section of the policy without notifying the Civil Service Commission and submitted that to the Board of Commissioners. The personnel policy was returned to the Civil Service Commission for corrections at that point. Then in, that was July, August of 2019, it went back forward, and Article 10 still hadn't been added back in during a second reading, all right? So that hadn't happened. Go to June of 2020, all right? They were trying to fill a vacancy for the city treasurer and advertising for a position, which I believe was Mr. Daniels at this point for city manager, all right? Andrew Laughlin was interviewed individually by the commissioners to determine if he would be a finance consultant, all right? Go forward to August of 2020. So that's June, August, 2 months. There's a joint meeting between the Civil Service Commission and the Board of Commissioners. The entire discipline section of the personnel policy had been removed. The Board of Commissioners sent the document back to the Civil Service Commission again to continue working on it. Labor attorney offered to create, the labor attorney at the time, which I think was Eschenfelder, I'm positive was Eschenfelder, offered to create a better version for the Civil Service Commission to consider. The Civil Service Commission members were to send their changes to the city clerk. Commissioner Price would work as a liaison with the labor attorney to create a workable document, which is really cool because Price in her practice was a labor attorney. That was a really good thing, you know. The document included a section on whistleblowing, all right? In August of 2020 again, first draft of the new personnel policy and associated ordinances, all right? Labor attorney Eschenfelder document was transmitted to the Board of Commissioners, and it was requested that the following actions occur. 1, provide the document to the Civil Service Commission in advance of their next meeting. Schedule a meeting with the Civil Service Commission to review, get feedback, and provide recommendations. Provide a courtesy copy of the personnel policy to the union president. I don't know anywhere we've been doing that, but I think that would be a good idea, all right? And after the Civil Service Commission provided its recommendations, the final version would be presented to the Board of Commissioners with input from Commissioner Price. Let's move forward from August of 2020, and we'll go down to January of 2021. All right, there was a rewrite of the employee personnel manual and recommended changes for adoption. This was a comprehensive review of the documentation provided by labor attorney Eschenfelder. One item of concern is changing employee vacation. That's separate, sorry. The document was reviewed, and at this point it was approximately 60% completed. Now this is going from 2019 through 2021. 60% completed, all right? And by the way, it's a different city manager, all right? March of 2021, Lilly stated that HR needed flexibility and not be locked in with the labor attorney's version of the personnel policy. All participants in this meeting were informed that the Board of Commissioners instructed the Civil Service Commission to set aside the old personnel policy, that's the 2019 version that we're currently working with, all right, and to use the labor attorney's version as a framework. The labor attorney advised against using the original personnel policy because it potentially opens the city for litigation. Flexibility, and I put quotes on that, is an issue because when you provide flexibility and you don't have a set of rules, you differentiate what you provide for one person and another, and you open yourself up for a lawsuit as a city. That's what we're supposed to avoid as a Civil Service Commission. The labor attorney, and I'm putting emphasis on this you need to understand. Now that management's recommendation is to go with an entirely different document, he could no longer talk about the one that he produced. So the city manager being inside of the meeting and saying, no, we're not going to use this. We're going to go back to the 2019 version because we want flexibility, prohibited Eschenfelder at that point because he represents city administration from being able to discuss that document, which is a better version of a personnel policy that was requested by the Board of Commissioners. So keep moving forward from there. In January 2022, all right, so we're going 9 months ahead, 10 months actually. It had been 10 months since there was a meeting, all right? Since that last meeting, there were resignations, commissioners had termed out, there were not 3 members to hold a quorum, and the city manager at the time wanted to delay the meeting so that the new city manager, which is, I believe, currently Gomez, could be present, all right? 2022 is about the time Gomez started working, so I believe that's what that reference is, all right? It was stated in the meeting on January 22, per the city charter, the city manager must agree with all recommended changes to the document before it goes to the Board of Commissioners for adoption. The HR director must also be involved in the process.
If you go back to the original stuff, and you go back to the charter, there are 5 members of the Civil Service Commission. We, as a Civil Service Commission, must agree on what's going to be in that policy. When we agree, then it's suitable to ask for advice from the city manager. And we do not want to be so inflexible that it makes the city manager's job impossible. That would be entirely unfair of us. All right? The HR director, that is incorrect, right? It's because the city charter, once again, the Civil Service Commission shall prepare personnel rules. When concurred by the city manager, the rules shall be proposed to the Board of Commissioners. It does not say that the city manager takes them to the board. That allows us that opportunity, so I'm phrasing it correctly, to request a joint mission with the Board of Commissioners so that we can say we have a consensus. Would you accept these? Or vice versa, the other side of it, we don't have consensus. What direction do you want us to take? All right? And the Board of Commissioners may by ordinance adopt, and I'm not going to keep going through that, but you guys know what those are, all right? I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to move forward, all right? In that meeting, it was set up that April of 2022, June of 22, August of 22, and November of 22 would be meetings to discuss the policy that you're now being forced to use, which is the 2019 version. I want to state ahead of time, every meeting except for the first one, which is when you receive those documents, people consistently requested that we use Attorney Eschenfelder's document. That has not changed. Attorney Eschenfelder's document is comprehensive. It is not inflexible. It does provide more safety for the city and consistency in the way it deals with employees. So, April of 2022, Civil Service Commission meeting. Commissioner Ponte discussed using the more inclusive, more detailed version of the personnel policy. Commissioner Tilka, and this is what was written, Mr. Tilka, right, thought that the BOC had made changes because it wanted to simplify the more complex personnel policy. That was what was written. He wanted to follow the version the BOC voted on. I want to state it's ambiguous what they meant there. I believe the intention was to use Attorney Eschenfelder's. It was a little ambiguous, all right. Commissioner Embler requested to follow the labor attorney's document during that meeting. Commissioner McLaughlin wanted to use the more appropriate plan for the city, working with the original draft and taking some things from the labor attorney's draft, all right? So we have 3 people wanting one way, 1 person wanting another way, all right? So,
All right, can you restate what
this says, what it said in the notes is Commissioner Embler requested to follow the labor attorney's document. That's what it read
Right.
in the
Yes.
in that
That's
document,
true.
okay?
Yes.
The labor attorney clarified that the original document was for him to produce, the original plan was for him to produce a draft because the original handbook was confusing, outdated, and unorganized. That's the 2019 version we're currently using. Administration wanted to stay with the original draft, and that was the document he must proceed with, administration being the city manager of the time. He would provide input on any changes as appropriate in each section. And in this meeting, Articles 1, 2, and 3 were reviewed. All right? Hard copies of the labor attorney's documents were requested, and then you go to June 2022. In this meeting, all right, there were some documents requested by HR. They weren't submitted. 2 of the commissioners submitted comments on, I think it was articles where I wrote it in here, 4 and 5, all right? And what ended up happening is in the meeting, they consistently addressed using the language from the labor attorney's version of the policy, all right? Every time it goes back, we need to use the labor attorney's policy. The labor attorney, Mr. Eschenfelder, the way it reads, if the code did not provide what the commission needs, they can discuss it in a meeting and send a code amendment recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So we are allowed to ask the Board of Commissioners for advice and recommendations, all right? Going beyond there, July of 2022, all right, it was a BOC regular meeting. All right, this is a Board of Commissioners. They were talking about the Civil Service Commission bylaws. And I can't tell if they're aware at this point of what's going on in the Civil Service Commission, or if anyone's going to the Board of Commissioners and providing feedback. It doesn't look like it, doesn't mean it didn't happen, all right? So Vice Mayor Andrews acknowledged that there was problems that occurred with the grievance procedures and mistakes that were made that had not been corrected. The Civil Service Commission conducts grievance hearings and makes a recommendation to the city manager, a charter officer. In one case, I believe he's referencing the 2018 issue, because in the notes of that, it actually showed he was there. In one case, the grievance was found in favor of the employee and against the city manager, and he, the city manager, ignored recommendations by the Civil Service Commission, and the Board of Commissioners did not act upon it. It appeared that the Board of Commissioners never received that input, all right? Remember, the minimum of what we have to on a grievance is give it to the employee and the city manager. That's the minimum. That's what's written in the city charter, all right? And this, again, so I'm stating it, this was not our current city manager, all right? I want to be really clear on those issues, because this is not Mr. Gomez, all right? Okay, they needed, what it was stated is they, us, the Civil Service Commission, needed more teeth to do their job so that it does not happen again. A city manager should not decide their own fate. If a charter officer files a complaint against an employee in the Civil Service Commission, I think that's written backwards, but I may have copied it wrong. I believe it's an employee files on a complaint against a charter officer. And the Civil Service Commission finds in favor of the employee, the complaint and recommendation should be given to the Board of Commissioners and not to the city manager. I have to disagree with that. The charter requires us at a minimum to give our findings to the employee and the city manager, at a minimum. The Board of Commissioners has consistently stated inside of the meetings from this point forward that they want a copy for any of the charter officers if there's a complaint lodged against them. So in our rules, we can write that says we can do this extra step. At a minimum, we must give it to the employee and the city manager. We cannot overstep the city manager unless we go back to the Board of Commissioners and ask them to request to have it put before the citizens of the city of Madera Beach to have a vote to change the charter itself. That's the only way that can be altered, all right? The procedures that are currently in place had to be changed to make that happen. He does not know how to make it change, but must be made by the voters or the Board of Commissioners so that it could happen, and that would change the dynamic and direction of the Civil Service Commission. Mayor Hendricks at that time agreed with Vice Mayor Andrews and supported the change in the civil service so they had more teeth. He was involved in the civil service hearing when that happened in the 2018, and he was very disappointed in how it handled and how the employee was handled. The Civil Service Commission is an impartial group, and if a complaint is found against the city in a grievance hearing, they need the ability to fight back when told their decision was meaningless. You were going to say something?
No, I just wanted to know the date, and you did add that. So
Yeah,
thank you.
that was July 2022. Okay. By the way, the documents that are listed inside of there, if you go back to the electronic, those dates are the very first thing in the electronic document title. Those are the very first things on them. So if you want to reference the dates, you can find this information in the documents. All right. Let me figure out, I'm sorry. Mayor Hendricks read the city charter, section 5.7, personnel system, Civil Service Commission, subparagraph A. It was page 3 of 56 of that packet and agenda. Merit principle, he was talking about how people should be promoted and demonstrated evidence of competence. I don't think that has a lot to do with this, but it is going to have something to do with other stuff we're going to talk about. The mayor said that the department heads should be the ones determining whether an examination for an employee needs to happen. That's something we're going to talk about later on, all right? I'm concerned, and please call a point of order if I'm wrong on this. I'm concerned this files into other things we're going to talk about. Mayor Hendricks read the city code, section 2-126, intent, part C, page 5 of 56 of that packet, and said that the Civil Service Commission members also recommend cost of living increases and employee pay adjustments to the Board of Commissioners for consideration. This is part of something else. I'm going to come back to that. I apologize. All right. Mayor Hendricks said if a charter officer brings a complaint against an employee and the Civil Service Commission finds in favor of the employee, then that should come before the Board of Commissioners and not to the charter officer that filed the charges. The only exception is there, if the charges are filed against the city manager, we must also provide a copy of our findings to the city manager. It is required in the charter documentation, all right? But we can, in our rules, make it so it goes to the Board of Commissioners. We can do that. August of 2022, all right? The Civil Service Commission in here stated and was informed that they can make their own rules. The Civil Service Commission may convey these concerns to the city manager or the Board of Commissioners. I believe, I could be wrong, I believe that was Attorney Eschenfelder that made that statement. All right. In this meeting, Article 6 was discussed. Articles 6, 7, 8, and 9 were to be reviewed for the September 12th meeting. I know in this meeting, Chair Embler asked for clarification on the whistleblower ordinance 20-17, referenced on page 141 of the labor attorney's document. H.R. Lilly stated that the law overrides anything that they do with the personnel policy. In some respects, I believe that's correct. If the law says that we're not doing something right, the law's going to overrule it. And I believe when they passed the ordinance, it actually provides for severability in any section of the ordinance that actually doesn't comply with the law. That's how that works. I believe the word is severability. Is that correct, Mr. Eschenfelder? He may not be there. I could be boring him half to death.
No.
Okay.
Hello?
Mr. Eschenfelder?
Yes.
When we make a rule and the ordinance is voted on by the Board of Commissioners, isn't the terminology something like it provides for severability in case if there's a nonconformance with whatever the state law is? Is that correct? There's some
Yes,
terminology of that effect?
It's best practice to include a severability clause in every resolution and in every ordinance so that if a subordinate governing board adopts something that's inconsistent with state law, that the court can sever the part which is inconsistent and the rest of the provisions will be saved. So that's why you do a severability, because otherwise some early courts ruled that if anything is preempted or illegal, that the entire ordinance would fail. So, you at least want to save the stuff that isn't a problem, and that's why you include a severability clause.
That's also known as a force majeure, correct?
No, force majeure is a contract term, meaning that if an act of God or some other unexpected event occurs that prevents you from performing the contract, that you are excused from that performance during the unexpected act of God.
Okay, so severability is different. All right, thank you, I appreciate
Correct.
that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right. December, yes, 10 is October. Sorry, 10 is October. Okay. October 22, Article 6 was discussed and the meeting consistently addressed using the language of the labor attorney's version of the personnel policy. I'm going to keep coming back to that. I'm sorry I pushed the wrong button. I got the wrong mouse. Sorry about that, guys. November of 2022, the labor attorney requested for an amendment to the city's code to address when an employment complaint is brought directly against the city manager. Under the current policy, complaints are brought to the city manager. There was an instance in the past where a complaint was brought against his former city manager and it did not fit the process that was in place at the time. He recommended the following: 1, a whistleblower process by ordinance, and 2, improvements that could be made in the terms of specifying the role and the responsibility of the Civil Service Commission. All right. Mayor Hendricks reviewed that ordinance and was happy with it. Commissioner Kerr asked if the Civil Service Commission had an opportunity to review it. The city manager stated it would go before the Civil Service Commission on November 30th. The consensus was to move forward with to the Civil Service Commission and return it to the Board of Commissioners by January. So February of 2023, all right? Article 10, and Article 11, and Article 12 were discussed. So that's disciplinary, harassment, and miscellaneous provisions. Director Lilly said supervisors, very, very important statement. Director Lilly in this meeting, this is February of 2023, stated that supervisors are only have the authority to give verbal warnings. But if it goes to a higher level, the department director gets involved. If the written warning is justified, then the written warning would be discussed by the human resources and the city manager. Vice Chair Ponte asked if the supervisor could write an email about the infraction. Director Lilly stated they could. A written warning is an official written warning letter that gets placed in the employee's personnel file. Vice Chair Ponte asked staff to consider adding the language from the attorney's version in 11.c.5. That could be 2.c.5, I'm not certain, all right? Director Lilly said that they changed the section's name to appeals. This is the grievance, section 10. They changed the name to appeals because grievance is collective bargaining, and the city does not have collective bargaining contract, which is not correct because the fire department is a collective bargaining, and they have different stipulations that actually supersede and extend beyond what we provide in the personnel policy. However, they still fall under the personnel policy if I'm correct. All right. Note, this is a contradiction to the city charter and its wording. All right. That is a contradiction because grievance, I think it's item 4 under 56C. I think it's 4. I could be wrong about that number. It specifically states grievance. We need a grievance policy. It can't be an appeals policy. All right. The labor attorney's version of the personnel policy is again referenced during this meeting for clarification and is stated that it is more comprehensive. Consistently, everyone's been saying we need to use the labor attorney's version. It was 60% completed, and then it was Daniels, I believe, that said, no, we're not going to use it. And at that point, Mr. Eschenfelder had no choice because city administration said they're not going to use it, and he could no longer discuss it. There's another point to be discussed here based on that, all right? And that's it. How do we get where we are? We're using a document that is knowingly fallible. We're using a document the lawyer has specifically recommended against using. City administration from past has stated that that document had to be used, and that's why we're currently reviewing it. We have a document that's not comprehensive. It's not inclusive. It gives too much flexibility where I don't want to say our document needs to be inflexible. That's not the case. But it gives too much flexibility where you can differentiate treatment from one employee to another, from one instance to another, and that sets the city up for liability, and that's where we have problems. So, with this, first thing that needs to be asked, the BOC, the Board of Commissioners, directed that it wanted Attorney Eschenfelder's version of the employee policy to be used. Will the city's administration agree with moving forward with this version of the employee policy, the personnel policy?
I'd have to refer to the city manager.
Yes.
I'm fine with whatever version you want to use, and that's been the discussions at the meetings, using both, and both have been presented, but I just continued what had been happening when I arrived, but I'm fine using whichever document the commission wants to use. I have no objection to using.
I recommend,
So however you want to proceed.
I thank you, sir, I appreciate that. I recommend we go back, instead of reviewing the document we're reviewing right now, because it is not comprehensive. We go back to Attorney Eschenfelder's document in 2020 that was submitted, is 60% through the process of being validated, and use that document. It will put the city in better standing. It protects the city, and it protects all employees. There are words that have to be changed in it. It is less work than we're currently doing. How do am I allowed to make a motion to do that?
I would like to just pause before your motion and thank you. This is really well done, and it really lays out how many hands touched this document along the way. Virtually everything that you brought up accurately reflects discussions that we had, including the 2018 situation. So thank you for doing that. The only one that I think that really can get us to the crux of the, which version to use is Rob. So I'm going to ask you in a second to give us your side of how that discussion went, with whom it went. I will reiterate that when the board kind of got reinstituted, I raised the same concern, but by then it was kind of a done deal that we were going to somehow go to this as the base document. So Rob, can you please help us understand how that went? I think I remember hearing that Commissioner Price was actually the one that said, don't go with the cities, it's too wordy, but I don't want to go by hearsay. You were there, please share with us your perspective.
Well, I mean, I wish you wouldn't have asked me to do that. It's awkward, talking about individual folks that were involved in the situation, but you deserve an answer, and so I, as Commissioner Cantrell correctly reported, this all started when I took over the labor and employment for the city, and they began looking at the existing document and making changes, and I commented to the commission that I felt that the existing document was very disorganized and didn't contain a lot of best practice provisions that it should, and that from a time perspective, which I say now with a huge sense of irony, from a time perspective, it would have been better just to toss it aside. And, I had a good model that I've used in other jurisdictions, and we could customize it to Madeira Beach. And so that, as Commissioner Cantrell indicated, was the direction that the commission wanted to go. They did ask Commissioner Price to review what I produced. I produced what I produced. It was sent to Commissioner Price. And at that point, while I never got actual verification of it, just because I didn't really want to be confrontational, it's my understanding from some folks that were at the city that several key people in the city, charter officers, did not like the provisions in my proposed new policy. And the whys and the wherefores, I'm not real sure about. That the only feedback that Manager Daniels and his then HR director gave me was it's too long. And, my response to that was that, well, if you could go through and show me what sections or whatever should be cut out.
Rob, we lost you.
My feeling is, and I have a provision. I'm sorry, where did you lose me?
Okay, you're back, yeah.
Where did you lose me?
Cut out when you said cut out.
Anyway, it's my advice to my clients that it's better to have provisions in a personnel policy, even if they're rarely used, because they're there when you need them, and you don't have to guess or call your lawyer. It's all spelled out right there. Primary example of that is the provisions that I put in on reduction in force, and so we hope that we never go through another economic downturn like occurred in 07 and 08. But if we do and layoffs need to occur, there's a process right there. It's got a page and a half to deal with it. But in any event, so I had, and Commissioner Emler on March 29th of 2022 had asked me to compile a history for him because he wanted to understand what had occurred, and I did, and sent him that email. But the timeline that I have is August 19th of 2020. I finished the first draft of the proposed personnel policy and transmitted it along with whistleblower ordinance to Manager Daniels and Commissioner Price. September 14th of 2020, I exchanged various emails with City Clerk and Mr. Trask, drafted revisions to the ordinance to incorporate amendments of the old city code provisions associated with Civil Service Commission to bring them in line with the proposed new policy and current laws. Transmitted that draft to the Manager Daniels and Clerk. September 21, 2020, I reviewed emailed comments and edits to the personnel draft from the clerk. On September 22 of 2020, I received and responded to questions from Ms. Paulson, who at the time was the personnel liaison, as I understand it, regarding lunch leave and military leave. On January 12th of 2021, the Civil Service Commission met. New members McLaughlin and Embler attended their first meeting. The minutes of that meeting reflect the manager, Daniels, and clerk explained elements of the draft by me. They, along with the executive assistant, had reviewed the 146-page document, but the commission members had not seen the document prior to the meeting. After approximately 2 hours of discussion, it was decided that the Civil Service Commission members would review the draft document and send their comments to Ms. Powers within 2 weeks. February 9th of 2021, I drafted email to Ms. Powers checking on the status of the CSC members' input as to the draft policy so I could begin doing edits requested by Manager Daniels. February 11th of 2021, I discovered that new CSC meeting was set for that Monday and had been scheduled without coordinating with me, and so therefore expressed my concern to staff. On February 16th, 2021, I coordinated with Ms. Powers to reschedule the CSC meeting. On February 19th, 2021, I received and began review of CSC member feedback on my first draft of the policy so as to be prepared for the March 3rd CSC meeting. March 3, 2021, Civil Service Commission meeting. The minutes reflect that the new HR director, Mr. Lilly, was introduced and expressed concern that the current policy is much clearer and more precise, whereas the new one, that would be the one I proposed, is too much detail and less easy to read. The city labor attorney, which was me, reminded the group that the board voted unanimously to instruct their firm to set aside the old policy and start with a new one from scratch. It was decided to not review the feedback submitted by the commission members. Instead, the city attorney, city manager, and HR director would meet to develop a best policy to work with. The next Civil Service Commission meeting was scheduled for April 12th, 2021. On March 9th, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I prepared for and attended a meeting with the new HR director on the city's efforts to merge my draft with the city's current policy. And I updated the city attorney.
You cut out Mr.
On
Eschenfelder.
that meeting of 2021. I read and made notes. It's related to, where did I cut out?
Oh, you cut out twice.
cut out?
Where was the last?
I believe it was a meeting with the HR director and city manager.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, on March 9th.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so on March 9th, I prepared for and attended a meeting with the HR director on the city's efforts to merge my draft policy with the city's current policy, and I updated the city attorney on that meeting. On May the 6th of 2021, I read and made notes related to the personnel policy draft created by the city's HR director, which is based on the model, the current model, in preparation for meeting with Manager Daniels on the same. On May the 13th, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I attended a meeting with Mr. Daniels on the city staff's draft of the personnel policy, and I advised the manager and the HR director on key issues or changes to the city's draft that I would advise. Mr. Daniels stated that he would consider my comments. My notes then say there is no further contact with me until January of 2022. On January 30th of 2022, I reviewed the city staff's latest draft of its personnel policy in advance of the Civil Service Board meeting the next day. On January 31, 2022, the Civil Service Commission met. Members Lockhart, Wells, Ponte, and Tilka took the oath. The commission members received the draft of the updates of the current personnel policy and procedures as prepared by city personnel without input from me. The members were asked to submit their comments. The next meeting was set for April 12th. On February 9th, 2022, I met with new manager Gomez to discuss the arc of the project and offer such assistance as the city may desire as it moves forward. City Manager Gomez indicated he would consider my comments. Then Commissioner Embler asked me some process questions. His first was, in the March 3rd, 2021 approved minutes, Attorney Eschenfelder said the board voted unanimously to instruct their firm to set aside the old policy. Did the BOC vote to change their opinion and authorize the update of the existing manual? My response was, I don't know the answer to this question. I was told by Manager Daniels that Commissioner Price discussed the initial draft with the clerk and the new HR director, and it was determined that it was too long. I don't know what full commission action, if any, occurred. His question 2, how will the city labor attorney be utilized in this process? Will he be asked to opine on our revised document to ensure that we have mitigated the areas of risk? My answer, as indicated in my meeting with new manager Gomez, I serve as the city's labor and employment counsel and will provide such legal advice and assistance as the city asks. With regard to publicly specifying the deficiencies of the draft policy developed by city staff, I shared those observations with Manager Daniels and the HR director at the meetings which occurred on March 9th and May 13th, 2021. As I did not know how the city staff would word the final policy brought before the CSC and did not want to create a public record reviewing deficiencies, my comments and recommendations were verbally delivered. Question 3. Tab 4 in our handbook contains the updated draft that we are to review. Why do the page numbers start with page 13 of 104? I am not in possession of this, so I cannot respond. Question 5, is there any better way to, so the rest of these questions deal with specificity, but then his 5th question is, can the city ask the Civil Service Commission members to have all comments received by a certain date to allow comments to be compiled for our next meeting? And I respond, that is what I'd asked to be done back in January 12th of 2021. CSC members did spend some time developing comments and questions, which were submitted in advance of the March 3rd, 2021 meeting. So that's my summary. In terms of my recommendation remains that the draft that I had proposed 3 years ago would have been the better model to proceed with, rather than trying to do surgery on the document that exists. But I just need for you all to understand that my role is to provide advice and counsel. And so where the Civil Service Commission and the manager are at odds over what version to use, I leave it to the two of you to figure it out. And I will help you with whatever model that you choose to use. My advice was and continues to be that my model is the better model moving forward. I do not know the real reasons, motives, concerns of the charter officials back in 2021 who conferred with Commissioner Price to decide not to use the model. I was always open to discussing what those concerns really were. All I ever got was that it's too long. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
It doesn't sound like you spoke directly to Commissioner Price. It was just information you received from Daniels and Lilly. Is that correct? Mr. Ashenfelder? Can you hear me?
Rob, we can't hear you.
I'm here.
You were saying that your understanding was that Commissioner Price had said that she did not want to go with the model that you had prepared and presented. Is that information conveyed directly from Lilly and Daniels, or did you hear that specifically from Commissioner Price?
That was conveyed to me when I met with Lilly and Daniels.
So Commissioner Price was not present, correct?
She was not present. She never did ever speak to me directly about my draft.
Okay. Then next thing, March 9th, May 13th meetings, you talked about HR, which I'm assuming is Lilly and Daniels in
Yes,
these
sir.
meetings. They're actually preparing documentation outside of the Civil Service Commission. Is that correct?
Well, when it became apparent that Manager Daniels was not going to use my draft and I did not have the city's document in Word form, Manager Daniels basically instructed Mr. Lilly to take over the whatever changes would be made, whatever drafting tasks would need to occur during the scope of the project. So they basically began drafting what they wanted. At that meeting, they said, well, if anything out of your policy could be put in our policy, what would you put? And, that's such a question. So I just grabbed, the 4 or 5 things that I felt were most critical to try to work in and told them, I would really like to see this, 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 and this. Those still didn't make their way into the draft until later in the project when those topics came back up again and Civil Service Commission members began asking where they were as well.
Thank you. That was very helpful, and thank you for having my email to you, because I did have all those same questions when we first became active. So in summary, where we are now is that we are working on a document, and it was my understanding, Rob, that we came to the meeting and the former city manager and Mr. Lilly were adamant that they were going to use their version as the base document. And my recommendation is that you said that you can only advise us, and that if the city wants to go down that path, you can continue to recommend your own version, but you are on contract to them, and they dictate how it's going to go. Am I misstating that?
Well, so we serve as the city attorney. Our ultimate client is the city of Madeira Beach, as governed by its board of commissioners.
Mhm.
And so by extension, we also represent the managerial officers, charter officers, the subordinate boards and commissions, including yourself. So, but what I was conveying to you at that time, to the commission at that time, is that it was then clear that Manager Daniels was not going to use or support using the draft that I had produced. And so at that point, since I did not draft the city's current policy, what was going to happen from that point forward is you guys work it through with the manager. I will sit there and you've sat through this, Madam Chair. Commissioner Cantrell is new, but the other two of you sat there through a lot of this. And when you went through when you came to certain sections, you would either raise the question or you would ask me to raise the question, and sometimes language was brought over that was, important to bring over. But that was really my role at that point, was trying to prevent a bad policy from going forward, or trying to make a not good policy just a little bit better through my comments. But Manager Daniels basically, in so many words, indicated that he would take it from here. Thank you very much. So.
Yes, we did hear that. I think between you, Rob, and Jerry, you've done an excellent job of helping us to put the puzzle pieces together and to recall how we got here. Now the big question is, where do we go from here? You've accurately summarized what happened, and we were under the impression that we had to go forward with the former city manager's version. He's no longer here. The HR, Mr. Lilly, was very strong in his opinions, no longer here. Is there anything that we need to talk about historically? If yes, let's do it now. Otherwise, I want to talk about the future and where do we go?
I have one thing I want clarification on. You asked a very valid question. City manager made a different direction, therefore the city attorney had to follow the city manager's advice. We are the Civil Service Commission, all right? City manager's important role. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Extremely important position. But if we run into a position as Civil Service Commission that we need to make decisions, and any future city manager decides that they do not agree with us, are you allowed to provide input to us, or do we need to get separate legal advice?
No, I'm 100% allowed to give legal advice, and if you would watch the meetings of the Civil Service Commission before you came on board, you would clearly see that I have given advice to the commission that I know Manager Daniels did not particularly want to hear. Again, our firm represents the city, including its constituent managerial staff and boards and commissioners. If you were to have a quasi-judicial discipline appeal hearing, there would be two attorneys, one representing the manager, if the manager so desired an attorney, and me representing the Civil Service Commission. So I from my firm, am the Civil Service Commission attorney, and if there is a conflict between administration and civil service, I would represent civil service, and one of my colleagues would represent the manager in prosecuting, if you will, the case before the commission.
Okay, then, is it okay if I ask another question?
Of course.
Okay, in March of 2021, the verbatim words that were on the document that's on the Civil Service Committee meetings notes, it's the meeting notes, it says, now that management's recommendation is to go with an entirely different document, it says he cannot talk about the one he produced. How do we avoid that in the future? Because if we want to move forward with a document, we should be able to do that.
Well, you are able to do it. I don't know if that's a direct quote, if it's in the minutes. I don't know. I didn't produce the minutes, and I don't vote on the minutes. But what I was conveying, and the chair can correct me if her recollection is different, is that because this isn't my document, I really can't speak to the recommendations that are being made by management. So, but I have consistently through the project, as Civil Service Commission members have said, Rob, what do you think? Rob, what do you recommend? I have given my thoughts, advice, and recommendations, even if Manager Daniels has felt differently. I mean, I have, my duty is to the city of Madeira Beach, and no city manager will ever cause me to refrain from providing full advice and service to the city.
And
so
if I
I don't-
might, Jerry, I'm hearing you read out loud those words, and I can understand how they were confusing. We voted on them, so I take responsibility for that. I will say, though, every session, we would turn to Rob and say, are we in trouble here, right, Paul? Tell us where we have risk. So Rob has definitely supported us on this. Now, I would like to, as the senior member of the committee, take responsibility for not having spoken up against the prior city manager and being more firm and saying, no, we don't like what you're doing. We're going to go to the board and get their permission or their recommendations. As a senior member, I need to be accountable for that, but just as background, Judith Ann and I were brand new. There were no existing members on it. We were really feeling our way. A lot of the language that I focused on was, we are advisors. We are not strong policy makers. So again, I take responsibility now in hindsight and looking at how you've presented it. Yes, perhaps I should have directed the Civil Service Commission to have more teeth, to say to former city manager. We can discuss woulda, coulda, shouldas, but in our next 12 minutes, I'd like to talk about our path going forward.
I would like to make a recommendation that we no longer use the 2019 version and we proceed with Attorney Eschenfelder's version as originally intended by the Board of Commissioners. I'd like to make a motion on that. Has to be seconded.
I'd like to second the motion.
Can we have a vote, please?
Jerry Cantrell,
I vote to discontinue the 2019 version and continue with the 2020 Eschenfelder version that is 60% completed.
right. Paul Tilka,
I concur.
Chair Ambler,
I concur.
the motion carried 3-0.
Okay, so my next item with 12 minutes will not get completed. Okay. I do want to bring this up, though, because it is important to be on the next one. This has to do with minimums in what we have in our rules. This is not the policy, this is our rules. This needs to be readdressed because it doesn't provide for the things that the Board of Commissioners requested that we include into our rules. So we need to go back, you did vote on this, all right? But we do need to go back and look at it. Just because you voted on it doesn't mean we can't readdress it.
I'm not sure that I'm following you, Jerry.
This is the ordinance 2023-06, Division 4 Civil Service Commission, structure and proposed reading. It's basically the rules of what we will do. It says who the commission members are, how we're going to proceed forward, what are our rules to conduct meetings. There's some things missing in here based upon what the past Board of Commissioners has requested that we include into it. So I actually have, I don't think it's included in the packet because I didn't know where to put this in but I have what has been looked at and reviewed. I also have a proposed document that states in there's certain times where we need to go beyond the city manager and report specific information to the Board of Commissioners. The minimum in a grievance is that it's the employee and the city manager. Based on the Board of Commissioners' requests, we need to add in there that if it's a charter officer, those 4 positions, that the grievance is filed against, that document also goes to the Board of Commissioners. There's other things that we need to address in it. That is one of the major things that needs to be included in this, because if it's not there, it's not our rules, we can't do it. And we, the Civil Service Commission, makes our rules. Board of Commissioners has to approve it. They can deny it, they can change it, whatever they want, but we have to rewrite those rules.
So we have been hell-bent, am I allowed to say that, on getting the policy document updated, setting aside a lot of these issues because I personally felt that the current document that they're working with has left the city at risk. And it was under my direction that we focus in our entire 2 hours, and it's taken us 2 years to do that. I agree. We need to look at other things. So how do we utilize our time to now basically start over again? And I'm not complaining, I'm just saying it's a fact. We've got to start over again, looking at the attorney's version as the base document, but look at all the things that we did before, make sure they're melded in, and talk about the things that you're suggesting that we do. It's,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Ms. Van Blarken, can you forward a document within the next few days that has the city attorney's version that is 60% completed, or would it be the city attorney that needs to send that to us? Mr. Eschenfelder,
We have that document
I would
from,
just,
can you forward that to the
Eschenfelder?
5 of us so we
I have
have it?
I
have a
paper-
copy, too.
I have a paper copy.
now
You're
Essenfelder
requesting
has the
electronic?
Word, we can get the Word version from him.
Can we get that, please? And then we have the
Yeah,
opportunity to review it.
I'll send it on to the clerk, and the clerk can then forward it on to you all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that we need to finish this policy, absolutely 100%. The question is, do you need rules first, or do we need to address the rules second? And that's really, you guys have been doing this historically longer than I have. So I would rely on you to advise, do we fix the rules, because the rules are how we dictate what we're going to do, or do we fix finish doing the policy? Which one do you want to address first?
My personal, and Paul, I'm going to ask you to weigh in too. My personal preference is to get the policy document up to date because we are at risk as the city. While the rules are not perhaps as clearly spelled out, I will say that at every meeting we ask, and that's why the HR thing is, are there any grievances? Are there any things that we need to be aware of? So we are doing it as a discussion point. But that's my personal recommendation, and, you know, I would like to hear Paul, what's on your mind?
Gee. I don't know, policies, one thing, and procedure another, but they commingle. And I really can't come up with which one is more important over the other. Can we go ahead with policy? I don't know. I'm sort of in limbo. I know they're both very important. I'm very glad that all of this came up today. I'm very glad that we took a vote and the direction we're headed currently. We needed to be on that track a long time ago. I think Mr. Eschenfelder's expertise will keep us out of trouble. And I also feel like a lot of this policy is boilerplate and needs to be like, that we don't vary that much from other communities, that we are just following our procedures. So I really can't put one over the other as far as importance. Is it possible to go on simultaneously with both by delegating a portion of our time to one thing or the other, rather than, you know, does it have to be all policy or does it have to be all procedure? Can we intermingle those two things?
That's a good point. I have always found it more productive if somebody does the legwork and then we all discuss it, rather than a committee get together and pick apart each sentence. Would you be willing, Jerry, to put together a rough draft for us?
Already have it. I'll give it to you.
You're awesome. You are awesome. And then to Paul's point, let's think about if we have a 2-hour meeting, until we get this document done, do we allocate 20 minutes towards non-items and the bulk of the time towards getting this done?
I would
Is
like
that-
to, I would like to request that we allocate an hour and a half towards the policy and 30 minutes towards the rules. If we're looking at the rules outside of it, I think it's going to be fairly straightforward. Minimal discussion, maybe 1 or 2 meetings, we'll have it approved. Yeah. And that 2023-06, I would like to request that we hold off on sending that to the Board of Commissioners until we've completed that redress of it.
Absolutely,
Good
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioners, you've already voted to recommend approval of the ordinance to the commission.
How do we correct that? Because there's things in there that need to be addressed based upon the Board of Commission's guidance that have not been done yet.
Let's talk about procedures for a moment. Thanks for, you weren't on it, but the commission did vote to accept it. That language had been around and had been vetted for quite some time. I'm hesitant to revisit something unless, it's so egregious.
There are items in there that I would state that must be corrected. Because it adds people into the Civil Service Commission that aren't there, that aren't supposed to be part of it. And it provides authority. Our secretary is ex officio, all right? The clerk is our ex officio secretary, all right? And Mr. Gomez, I mean nothing disparaging towards you on this. We have to review things that the city manager is doing. The city manager should not be involved in making a decision whether or not to cancel a meeting. If we're going to do that, it should be addressed through our secretary.
Of what? Jerry?
The meeting, in the rules right now, it's written that the city manager can cancel the meetings. That should not be there. It should be the Civil Service Commission, the chair and the ex officio that recognize, is there something to discuss? And if there's not, then the two of you make the decision to cancel the meeting, not the city manager. There are things. I have what's there that you voted on, all right? I also have something that corrects some of the things that are in there that have been historically problems. And Mr. City Manager, this is nothing against you. There have been historical problems. And we need to avoid any duplication of that, which means the rules need to be restated. It's not you.
Yeah,
It
I'm
is
fine
not
with
you.
that, but thankfully, we haven't had any issues in 18 and a half months.
Yes.
Now,
So things have been working fairly well.
where is that new ordinance, the whistleblower and the other language? Is that
Those
gone?
were adopted, the
They
whistleblower.
were-
No, we haven't adopted it yet. At the last meeting,
Our meeting or the
their
BOC?
meeting,
Yeah.
civil,
Which ordinance is that, Claire?
it's the
No, the
Civil
number, I'm
Service
sorry.
Rules, 06, I think it is. So it's actually an ordinance that you put together, your rules. And so Christina Ponte had asked that Jerry provide his comments on everything that he had went through. And then so he saw it, and then instead of somebody just writing the rules, y'all should really weigh in on your rules. And that's what he's trying to say, I think. And
But that's
add
not
in-
gone to the
No, it
Board
hasn't
of
been to the board
Commissioners
yet.
yet.
Yeah, you can, at the next meeting, we could put it on there and you can add your rules in there. How you want to do your meetings, when you want to meet, how often.
The rough draft
Since-
you've asked for, I could send
Madam
to Ms.
Chair,
Van Blargen, and then she could forward that to you guys.
So, Rob, you want to,
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, what I feel is going on is that the ordinance has been not moved forward because of the desire of staff not to move it forward, even though it has long ago been reviewed by the commission and agreed that it was good language. The commission sent it to the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission approved it, and yet still,
so it has it has not yet gone back to what we
meeting
approved,
after
has
is not
not
placed on
gone
the
to the
agenda.
Civil Service
it has
Commission.
been a concern.
Clara, what's the
It's
holdup?
It's
It
listed
has-
on the Excel spreadsheet. I think what it was, they were in the middle of getting a new commission or something, but it got moved on, there's a spreadsheet that the city manager has. And I know it is listed on there for a particular meeting.
First reading at the City Commission, Board of Commission meeting on August 9th
Yeah.
of 2023 will be ordinance 2023-06. Civil Service Commission ordinance.
Correct.
But this is separate from the whistleblower?
It is, there's two different ones.
Right, but the
because-
whistleblower was already adopted.
No, no, it has not.
That was not adopted.
Yeah,
So
that
why-
just got added on there for a particular meeting.
Yeah, we
I'm
have-
sorry, then it's right after that. Whistleblower ordinance
Correct.
2023-07 will also be for first reading and public hearing at the August 9th,
Correct.
Wednesday, August 9th, 2023, City Board of Commissioners meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I
yeah.
think the only change that Jerry's mentioning, because he is correct, because the Board of Commissioners did meet, in one of their meetings, it was brought up, and I think there was a topic on there about civil service bylaws or something. Well, they had asked that because of the Miranda grievance hearing that they had, that if they should rule in favor, their opinion, their recommendation in favor of the employee through their grievance hearing, and against the city manager, that they wanted that, because it's a charter officer who they're in direct control of, that it comes to the board. And I think that I heard, if I'm correct, that Jerry wanted that language just added to that ordinance. Is that what you were saying?
That's one, there's like 2 or 3 fixes in there. That's one, which if you guys are okay, I don't know what the right thing is to do here. So I do know that we need to redress it. We need to look at it and make a change, which if we make a change, even though it's been accepted and it goes before and it becomes a rule, there's nothing stopping us from saying, hey, look, we noticed something that was omitted. Board of Commissioners, please take a look at this. We'd like for you to vote on it again. There's nothing that prevents us from doing that. The other thing is we could send information to the Board of Commissioners saying, hey, look, we know that there's a potential this needs to be changed. Can you hold? Or do they just vote on it? I don't know what the rules are there. I have no idea how that should proceed.
Well, my strong preference is to have the package of both ordinances go forward to be adopted. There's nothing that prevents the Civil Service Commission from simultaneously discussing, does it want further tweaks to what was just adopted? And then you would simply do a new ordinance and recommend that the commission approve that. I just don't want to delay everything because there are a lot of needed changes to occur. And, frankly, a majority of the Civil Service Commission may or may not agree with some of Commissioner Cantrell's fixes or whatnot. And so then we've delayed and Commissioner Cantrell, please don't take any offense to that. I have no idea what the Civil Service Commission would feel. I just don't want to delay for months more the entire package just to deal with those issues.
Correct. Now, ordinance can be changed on first reading and go to first reading, as long as it doesn't change the header. The title would have to be changed in that meeting only, because when it goes to second reading, we can't change the title. But in the first reading, we can go forward to second reading as long as it doesn't change the title.
What would
So
be-
anything in
My
the body
suggestion is any changes you'd like to make,
would need
Get them to
go.
you quickly.
before we take it to the board. Now, it was discussed at a workshop back in
Yes.
November the 7th of 2022. But yeah, if you want any changes, please feel free to
Can we
make them.
just, if I give
yeah,
my
can
notes
we-
to you guys, can we spend like 30 minutes talking about it? And if we can make changes, we make
Right
changes.
now?
If we can't, no,
No.
not today.
Okay, thank you.
At a future meeting.
Yeah.
But if we can agree on, okay, this looks realistic, then we send forward, hey, we want this fixed, and if it's okay. And if you guys don't agree with it, we don't move on it.
Right.
It stays the way it
Because
is.
it's your committee rules.
Right,
It's your
so
committee
can you
rules.
get this to us as soon as possible? And by that, I mean,
I'll send it to Ms. Van Blargen today, and
Yep.
hopefully you'll have it today or tomorrow.
all righty.
Is that
And
reasonable, Ms.
That
Van
is
Blargen?
reasonable. Yes, sir.
so we're going to get that. Our next meeting is the 8th. That gives, correct, is it August the 8th? Am I remembering correctly?
I have that correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is it 2 PM?
Yes.
Yeah. So that really puts on us, we've got to read it and be prepared on the 8th when we meet to make the final decision on that, and then we will decide, based on the vote of the commission, it goes as is, or we're going to
Correct.
speak up to change.
Because it's better to change it at that by the first reading instead of having to create a whole new ordinance and do
Right.
it again.
But if you discuss it on the 8th, my suggestion is it does not go then on the August 9th.
Well, We could put it on the August meeting, and then
If you make
somebody can
changes-
discuss the, at
I
the
think
first
you
reading.
make at the August 8th meeting, and then it goes at the September 13th commission meeting for first reading and public hearing, but.
Can we decouple and get the whistleblower through?
Sure.
If it's going to take longer?
I think the whistleblower wasn't, I don't think you had, yeah, I don't have any issues with it.
That passed by you guys.
Yeah, that
passed. And I
passed.
have no comments whatsoever on the whistleblower. Quite honestly, I spent so much time reviewing this other stuff
Alrighty.
that I did not review the whistleblower. I mean, that's truth. Another thing, if you guys are using Word-based Office-based products for the thing, for OneDrive with city stuff, be careful about them. There's an issue, and I submitted it, so there's an issue with with Word-based documents. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I took so
No,
much
no,
time, but
no
thank you
need-
for listening.
No
Also,
need for apologies. I want to just summarize what we discussed so that we're all on the same page. We all agree that our next meeting is August the 8th. The key point on that is going to revisit this the language that, so before it goes to ordinance, you're going to send that to us right away. We have decided that until this document, the policies and procedures is updated, we're going to dedicate an hour and a half of our meetings to the document, and then a half hour of other things, including other issues, and our HR report out. Now, we had a number of new business items on here that we didn't get to: the pay plan, the classification, satisfaction surveys, implementation. So we'll just move those forward with the understanding that we're going to tackle the most important, and these items will only get a half an hour time unless it's determined by either the attorney or city manager that this is urgent and it has to be done immediately. Is that,
Understood.
okay, is that
And leaving them
Fair.
on there helps you keep track of what you're doing.
right?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Rob, what have I missed? You're here to keep me honest and out of jail.
I think you missed your cutoff time. Larry.
Well said. You're right. Would anybody like to add anything else
I
in
would
a
like-
minute or less?
I would like to add, Mr. Gomez, Robin, thank you for being patient, listening through that, and thank you for agreeing to allow us to move forward. Because that was really a key component of where we could move.
I think all these meetings, I mean, it's the Civil Service Commission work to do. I will do what, as directed by the commission, and offer whatever we need to do. That's been my role since I've been here, and to be collaborative, cooperative, so I will continue to do that as long as I am here, and as well as staff, so.
And one more
Thank
time
you.
before it ends, I just want to make sure it's officially stated, a lot of the things I discussed about city manager had nothing to do with Mr.
Right.
Gomez.
I will
It
make
was-
that note.
It was
Yep.
passed. I don't want it to be on a record making people think that it had anything to do with him.
Right.
It did not. Okay?
Fair enough. Thank you. And thank you, Jerry. You clearly put a lot of work and effort and thought into this, and we are so appreciative. Thank you.
Sorry it took more than 10 minutes.
Oh, worth every second, so thank you. I don't have to, but I'm going to declare this meeting closed at 4:10. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.